Tonight, snow at times accumulating up to an inch, low 26. Breezy tomorrow morning, otherwise it'll be a cloudy day. High tomorrow, 32. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Your next news update is at 7:30. Continuous coverage of news, traffic, and weather at 560theanswer.com. Chicago's Morning Answer continues now on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the IRS Radio Hour with Stephen Leahy. Every Sunday afternoon at 5 on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning is Sean from Elmwood Park. And the Trump administration sent a little bit of a New Year's message to Iran, carrying airstrikes against Shiite militia groups in Iraq and Syria yesterday. 3 of the Hezbollah militia's locations in Iraq and 2 in Syria, including weapons storage and command facilities. Officials saying the strikes came in response to an attack on Friday in which more than 30 rockets were fired at an Iraqi military base near Kirkuk, killing a U.S. contractor, wounding 4 U.S. troops. For more on this rolling conflict and the others that we should be looking forward to dealing with in 2020, we're pleased to be joined again by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So what about these strikes in Syria and Iraq?
Well, they certainly were proportional. I mean, these were militias that intentionally targeted places where they knew there were Americans. And so for the U.S. to take that kind of response certainly makes sense. Look, not to throw rocks at the last administration, but we could debate the wisdom of going into Iraq to begin with. We can certainly critique the occupation afterwards, which was incredibly badly executed. But the reality was, is in 2008, we reached a pretty good place there, and the Obama administration came in, did a quick drawdown, and the result of that is we never really cemented in place the kind of governance and security structure that would have made Iraq really a resilient state. And so first there was the revival of ISIS, now there's the incursion by Iranian influence, and we're at a place today where the best that we can hope is a relatively stable, neutral Iraqi state, and that right now is very much an open question.
In other words, it being an Iranian ally, essentially, or being an Iranian surrogate state.
Right. I mean, Iran really has tried a full court press in Iraq, which, look, if you just think about this, they fought a decade-long war. I mean, even many of the people that died in that war were Iraqi Shias fighting against a Shia regime in Iran. So even within the Shia community, there's not a desire to essentially be a vassal state of Iran. So there's a real struggle going on here. It's super complicated. So you have that going on. You have the Kurdish, which is interesting, where the Kurds are just kind of sitting on the sidelines watching this whole thing, trying to stay out of the way. So this will be something that continues to make news throughout the year, because both sides are going to be pushing back and forth for the soul of the Iraqi nation.
James, unfortunately, I've been paying attention to this for a long time, right? So I'm disgusted. As you said, you could go back to the 50s, for God's sake, and
right.
What we've been doing in the Middle East. It's just one mistake after the next. And now there's the release of these Afghanistan papers, right? Which from all accounts looks like we've been lied to by the guys who are in charge. I mean, is that a fair assessment? $1 trillion are missing?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. First of all, I wouldn't say that our Middle East policy has been a mitigated disaster. Our basic vital interests in the Middle East are just that the United States continues to have access to the region. The region is a problem for the larger world. And, by and large, that for decades, the U.S. has achieved that. And at a relatively modicum of cost. We haven't gotten nearly as deeply engaged in the Middle East until we did the Iraqi incursion, which, again, we could all debate the wisdom of that, as we are in other regions of the world. And Afghanistan, first of all, I think that article was just cherry picking. Again, what are our interests in Afghanistan? That the Taliban don't roll back, have another sanctuary, and destabilize the region. That goal's been maintained for a decade. So, yeah, there have been serious sacrifices, stupid mistakes, and all kinds of other things, but have America's vital interests been compromised in either place? I think the cold reality is that, no, not really.
Speaking of destabilizing forces, you had 2 attacks over the weekend from apparently from 2 different terrorist groups. Al-Shabaab in Somalia, of course, an Al-Qaeda affiliate.
Yeah.
90 killed in a truck bomb in Mogadishu, 90 plus maybe. And then ISIS beheading 11 Christian hostages in Nigeria and announcing that was vengeance for the death of al-Baghdadi. So give us your handle on Al-Qaeda and ISIS in the coming year.
Well, this is, Africa is going to be problematic. So Nigeria, the big problem here I think is really the inept response from the Nigerian government, which has been pathetic. So that's going to be an ongoing problem. Somalia has slipped backwards, which is deeply troubling. I think the big news story is Libya, and it's not just ISIS and Al-Qaeda. You have the intrusive influence of Turkey, the Russians. The problem is all these people have enough power to meddle. None of them really have enough power to kind of take over or fix the problem. And the result of that is it just creates discord. And that opens spaces for the ISIS and Al-Qaeda of the world. So it's hard to see a scenario where North Africa doesn't continue to be a troubled region that attracts a lot of attention over the next year.
So the reality is we're just going to be involved in the Middle East for 100 years then. I mean, the reality is we're just not going anywhere, right?
Well, here's the way I explain it. The United States is a global power with global interests, and what connects the United States to the rest of the world is Europe, the greater Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. And U.S. interest is basically those areas, not the land of milk and honey, not that you kill every terrorist, but that they're basically stable. And if you think about in a forest fire scenario, all we want is we don't want the forest fire. So, you may have to go in, put out some small fires and stuff. You just can't walk away. But yeah, I think the U.S. is going to be engaged in all 3 of those regions. I think the question is, and to your point, because I think your point is exactly right, how do you do this in an intelligent, sustainable, rational way where we're not trying to be the world's policeman and solve every problem, and we're investing enough to protect our interests, but we're not investing so much that we're draining our own national power and wealth and needlessly sacrificing lives? That's exactly the right question. So it really calls for a bit of probity, and this is going to be a year where that's never more important because it's a highly politicized year. So every time something happens one way or another, people are going to scream to get all the way in or get all the way out, which probably neither of those is the right answer.
Where is some place that we should be looking that not much attention is being paid to, at least through the media filter at present? I mean, of course, North Korea, China, the Middle East, the places we've talked about and will continue to talk about, but someplace else that should be on our radar that's not getting the attention it deserves.
Well, of course, I think Libya is really the not sufficiently covered story, and really a trouble spot that really has potential to ripple through. Algeria is another country right next to Libya that's worth watching. I think in Latin America, the Venezuelan story is far from over, and which way Venezuela tips is going to significantly impact the politics of Latin America in the years to come. Also important to watch is a very important election in Taiwan, where I think the Taiwanese people have looked at what's going on in Hong Kong and are about to bring in a government that's resoundingly anti-Chinese.
I wanted to get your reaction to this New York Times story on Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, the featuring testimony from SEALs on his team, who the SEALs who initially turned Gallagher in. The guy is freaking evil is the headline that was being trumpeted throughout the Beltway media outlets this weekend. Of course, this is a controversial figure, not just for that reason, but because he was essentially absolved of his the crimes against the charges against him by President Trump, and it was the basis over which the former Navy Secretary resigned. Does that New York Times story change your view on Trump's decision with respect to Gallagher?
I don't think so. It actually sounds consistent with a lot of other things that I think have been publicly discussed. Gallagher was no choir boy. He also had multiple deployments, and that you could obviously see that was wearing on him and his other compatriots and their ability to do their job. We really pushed those guys to the limit. And, I go back and we wrote a long piece on this in the Daily Signal, which is the Heritage website news source, where I had several folks who, like me, are retired military folks and also have been involved in UCMJ, also active in talk to UCMJ lawyers and stuff. I think our relative consensus was, look, if at the end of the day, when everything had been done, the president had decided to want to act, that would have been appropriate. Probably not a good. It's not a good precedent for the president to be jumping in, even well-intentioned, hearing from people about this case. He should have let the system run its course, and that's always, I think, the preferential answer.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great show. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Enjoy the weather. Get out the sunscreen.
It's Illinois, Jim.
Hey,
it's Illinois,
50,
Jim.
It was 52 yesterday or something like that. And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Hi, it's Amy Jacobson, and I have an exclusive offer for our listeners just in time for the holidays. If you buy a set of Giza cotton sheets from MyPillow, you'll get a second set free, 2 for 1. Not only that, but you'll get free shipping. If you add anything else to your order, like MyPillows, mattress toppers, towels, anything, those items will ship free too.